This is Senior Algebra, Section 5.7, dividing polynomials here. So today we're doing two things, dividing a polynomial by a monomial, so one term there, and then a polynomial by a polynomial, so 2 or 3 or 4 terms divided by 2 terms here. So we'll start with the easy one, polynomial divided by a monomial. So if you remember in the warm-up, we did adding fractions here, and basically we're undoing that. Whenever we have something on the bottom here, 4x cubed, I can split everything on the top up and write 4x cubed under it. So I get 16x to the 5th on top over 4x cubed on the bottom. And I'm going to split it up for each of the 3 terms on the top. And at this point, I'm just going to simplify each part here. 16 over 4, that's 4. And then, x to the 5th, x to the 3rd, we subtract, that's x squared. We get minus 3x and then plus 2. Now we have the x squared on top, x to the 3rd on the bottom, so there are more x's on the bottom, so it's going to be over x to the 1st. So when we have a monomial on the bottom, pretty straightforward in how we're going to do this. In B, this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult. We have a polynomial inside and a binomial on the outside here, the 2x plus 3. So in this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the long division. You learned this back in 4th grade, and I'm going to look at the 2x and go, okay, 2x times what gives me 8x cubed? Or 8 divided by 2 is 4. X cubed, x, I need x squared. So now I'm going to multiply the 4x squared to each of these terms. So 4x squared times 2x, that's 8x cubed. 4x squared times 3 is 12x squared. Now the key is I have to remember is I have to subtract. I subtract both things here. Some people, when they subtract, they'll literally change both things. So go ahead and basically distribute the negative here and make it, oh yeah, it's a minus 8x cubed and a minus 12x squared here. Now when I subtract, I want that first term to drop out, and it does. And then I get negative 16x squared. I bring down the next term, minus 14x. And I'm going to start the process over. What times 2x is negative 16x squared? Well, if I think about the numbers, negative 8 times 2 is negative 16, and x times x is x squared. So I multiply it down now. Negative 8x times 2x is negative 16x squared, and negative 8x times 3 is negative 24x. I subtract. And again, right now I'm just going to circle it like this. And what does that mean? That becomes positive as well. The first term becomes 0, which is what we want. And then negative 14x and 4x gives me a 10x. I bring the 15 down, and I do it one more time here. What times 2x is 10x? Or, if you wanted to kind of reverse it, 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay. So 5 times 2x is 10x. 5 times 3 is 15. When I subtract one more time, what happens? The 10 becomes negative. The 15 becomes negative as well. So basically what? The minus sign you can get rid of as long as you distribute that negative here. What do I get? I get 0, which means there is no remainder. So my final answer is just 4x squared minus 8x plus 15. Or plus 5, I'm sorry. So example 3 here. Do the same thing. I'm going to rewrite it here. I always want things in descending order, so I have the 2x minus 1, and I'm going to rewrite each term here. 4x cubed minus 4x squared plus 5x minus 8. Now again, I'm going to think, what times 2x is 4x cubed? Well, if I look at the 2, 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so I know there's going to be a 2 here. I have one x out there. I need 3 of them, so I need an x squared. So it's going to be 2x squared. Notice I put the 2x squared over the x squared column. So now I multiply. And then I subtract here. So what happens? When I subtract, it becomes a negative 4x cubed and a positive 2x squared. The first term cancels out, and I get negative 2x squared. I bring down the next term, 5x. But I do the same thing over. What times 2x is negative 2x squared? So I need a negative 2. That means it's going to have to be a negative 1. And I need one more x to get x squared. So I multiply down now. Negative 2x squared. Negative 1x times negative 1 is a positive 1x squared. I subtract. That becomes positive, that becomes negative. I can get rid of the minus here. And I get 4x. So I have 4x minus 8. What times 2x is 4x? If I think, oh, it's a 4. No, 4 times 2 is 8x. Nope, that can't be right. What times 2x is 4x? Just a 2. So 2x times 2x is 4x. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. I subtract, which means I'm going to distribute that negative to both things. That becomes negative, that becomes positive. I can get rid of the subtraction. And I'm left with negative 6. So I have a remainder here. I have to write that remainder in the problem here. So I'm going to write out what I have, 2x squared minus 1x plus 2. And then the remainder here, plus, and then I write it as a fraction, negative 6. Then I go on the top. And what I divided by is going to go on the bottom. I divided by 2x minus 1 from there. So that's what goes on the bottom here. In the last example here, I have a binomial divided by a binomial here. So 2 terms and 2 terms. Looks pretty simple. Actually, one of the more difficult ones that you'll see here. For this reason, you have to rewrite it, and you have to add some placeholders in. So I'll show you what I mean here. I have x cubed minus 1. There are no x squareds. There are no x's here. But I do have to add them in when I am dividing here. So I'm going to do x cubed plus 0x squared plus 0x minus 1. Now the same thing would hold if I was dividing by x squared minus 1, which I'll show you in a second here. So the placeholders with 0 must be added. Has to be in descending order. I can't skip any. Notice it goes x cubed, x squared, x, and no x's. Again, if this was x squared minus 1, I would have to add a placeholder outside as well. X squared plus 0x minus 1. In this case, it's not. So I don't need to, but you will encounter some problems where you may need to. So I have x squared minus 1, and now I'm going to play the same game. What times x is x cubed? Well, that's x squared. I multiply x squared down, x cubed minus 1x squared. I subtract, which means x cubed becomes negative. the 1 becomes a positive 1x squared. I add down, I get 1x squared plus 0x. What times x is 1x squared? Just a single x. X times x is x squared. X times negative 1 is negative 1x. I subtract, which means that becomes negative, that becomes positive. And I'm left with 1x minus 1. When I bring the negative 1 down, what times x is 1x plus 1. So I'm left with x minus 1. When I subtract, my remainder is 0. So my final answer is simply going to be x squared plus x plus 1.